Right. Well, hi, Nick. Lovely to see you. Um,
Hi.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. So we're talking at the Care UK Lifestyles Conference, and I've got the pleasure to introduce Nicola Kendall to you. And Nick, do you just want to talk a little bit about yourself, just and talk a bit about your background and tell people who you are?
Yeah, I started out my career actually in adult learning disability services for the local authority. I didn't know back then how relevant it would be to what I'm doing now, but actually I used to work with people who have profound and multiple disabilities. So a lot of the work that we did was sensory. So use of sensory rooms, snoozling rooms they were called, um, and very gentle sensory activities.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I've seen those rooms. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, bubble tubes and all that kind of thing, but very some similarities to a Namaste room.
hmm
Uh, and then I kind of had one of my many midlife crises in my 30s and completely retrained in mental health. So I became a psychotherapist and I worked for the next about 11 years in primary care mental health.
Okay.
Um, and that has its challenges. It's very rewarding, but real challenges. But that is very much around how you engage people and build rapport. And again, I think I can see the seeds of what I'm doing now in some of that.
Wow.
And then about 6 years ago, I saw this job title, Namaste lead at St Cuthbert's Hospice in Durham, and I was just intrigued by the job title. I knew nothing about Namaste care at the time. Um, Looked at the job description and actually thought there's a lot of what I've done in the past that this kind of brings together in one package. Um, I was really excited about the idea that this was going to be a community-based project. So whereas Namaste Care is usually in care homes, this would be taking Namaste Care into people's own homes, trained volunteers going to do visits. Um, and it was kind of like building a project from scratch, from absolute zero. I was really excited about that. So I was really lucky to get the job. There was a lot of competition, a lot of people were equally interested. Um, and that was kind of the start of the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my entire career. I just loved every minute of the Namaste project work. Every volunteer had a heart of gold. They came from lots of different backgrounds and had lots of different motivations for getting involved. Um, but the one common thing that they all had in common was just the absolute genuine interest in other people and wanting to spend time, that gift of time,
Yeah,
is the most precious thing that we give, isn't it? With Namaste Care, that gift of just presence and time.
yeah.
And they would come back and say, "Oh, thank you so much for letting me do this." And I'm like, "Oh, no, thank you for giving your time." But you could see the mutual benefit really quickly, that the volunteers were getting as much benefit from the visits as the person with living with dementia. So, yeah, it was an absolute joy.
Wow.
And then sort of in the last year, a couple of years, I've moved on to actually study Namaste Care as part of a PhD, which is something I never dreamed I would do. Um, but one of the tricky things about Namaste Care, I think, is how we evaluate it. How do we, when the people that we're working with can't verbalize and really express how they feel at the end of a session,
Yeah.
we've got to base our kind of outcomes, which are important to funders and to sort of show evidence of benefit. How can we do that when the person can't self-report? So
Mm.
that's what my current study's looking at. So here I am in my 50s back at university.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been a real journey, real interesting journey.
So it's great to see how Namaste has grown throughout Care UK, and it's really, really exciting. And just to get the team thinking of their approach and how they're gathering data, what are some of the ways that you might look at to measure that impact, to measure the benefit of Namaste?
Yeah, I think that there are various things to think about in terms of measuring it. Over time in care homes, I think the quality measure is quite useful because there's kind of a regularity around Namaste Care that can allow you to use the quality measure. The issue with going into the community that we found was because that was just, say, once a week, a visit once a week. So you need to be able to measure the benefit across one session, the time frame of one session. So if you've got Namaste care happening regularly, you've got the opportunity to use quality as a measure. If it's happening less regularly, that's what I'm currently working on, to produce an outcome measure that just measures one session. So the outcome measure that is actually going to be piloted in my local NHS trust is based on a consultation that I did that asked people to get really specific about what do you see in somebody, all of the non-verbals, the facial expression, the posture, their communication, non-verbal communication, what is it that you see, all of these fine details that lead you to believe, because people report, don't they, that, oh, well, they seem better by the end of the session. What does seem better mean? What does improved well-being actually mean? What does it look like? So this measure will hopefully do that. So that's being piloted at the moment. It's sort of in development and it'll get refined, but then that'll be available to use. But I think one of the things to think about, and I was just had a meeting talking about this actually, is having those kinds of measures that are attractive to use, that they're just not another care task, that they're actually useful in some ways, that they add to information about that individual. It's part of the record, it's part of planning for future sessions. So you're kind of using that as a real tool that has some meaning, that it's not just, because it could just come across like, you know, a management tool or an organizational tool to prove benefit, but actually it's got to have some meaning for each individual as well. So hopefully this measure does both of those things. So it'll give you a quantitative measure before and after a session, but it'll also allow you to record some of the personal things that have either worked or not worked, because not all sessions work how you think they're going to work. Sometimes, you know, you have a session that falls flat, but then the next time you have that session, that very similar session, it could go better. So it's just having a record of all of those things I think are important, that kind of builds a picture for that individual.
Yeah, lovely. And so how do you feel, Nick, about an organisation like Care UK adopting Namaste and taking it within their service as part of their delivery? And how do you feel about that?
I think it's amazing. It makes people, I think any organisation that adopts it, it kind of stands out from the rest. You know, if you think about carers, family carers, that transition into care is such a stressful time. And alongside that, and I speak from personal experience, alongside of all of that becomes carer guilt, and, you know, wanting the absolute best for the person that has moved into care. So there's a kind of reassurance, I think, that people aren't being overlooked if they know that they're going to have the real sort of gift of time that Namaste Care gives. You know, it's not just about the focus on care tasks, it's about real quality of time together. And actually the staff, I mean, I used to do visits, and the staff will find as much benefit to being in those sessions as the people that they're spending time with. You know, it's a real mutual benefit. So I think that kind of boost for staff morale is definitely there for the, you know, for any organisation that adopts Namaste Care. It can be difficult sometimes to, once it's been introduced, to maintain the kind of momentum of that, but it certainly is a step, and it shouldn't be a step above. It should be really just good care. Everybody should be doing it, but I think certainly it kind of demonstrates a real commitment to good quality care, excellent care.
It says something about the culture of the organisation, doesn't it? Because it's so much more than just a session or sessions that run. It's an approach, isn't it? It's a way of doing things. So it has been so exciting, you know, to hear the work that Care UK are doing. So as they start now becoming proficient at Namaste, you know, more people are hearing about it, getting the families involved. What are some of the ways that, you know, we can keep it fresh and can keep up the momentum you were talking about?
Yeah, it can be. I hear lots of different organisations kind of hit this point where it's established, but it's about maintaining that good practice. And I think it's almost like Namaste Care has an energy, doesn't it? It's like, how do we nurture and protect that energy? Because it's very easy for other things, being short-staffed or other kind of tensions and pressures and challenges to kind of get in the way, and Namaste Care gets pushed aside. And it's almost like, how do we protect this as kind of a central core service? One of the things that really helped, I think, with the project at the hospice, and I think it would be good practice, you know, in any organisation, is to introduce kind of peer supervision, peer support. Because what you tend, you know, not all members of staff, not all people, not all volunteers are all very creative. But you always have ideas people. You always have the people in the team who are the ideas people. So just having some time to sort of reflect, debrief, talk about ideas, get really creative with activities. You know, it's lovely to have themed sessions, you know, and if you can base those on things that you know were important to an individual, like a hobby or a place that they visited or something like that. Really kind of thinking about what is, taking a thread of what's familiar, and kind of building on that and creating a themed session is just going to be as good for the staff as it is for the people that they spend time with. So one example of something that we did with that at the hospice was we took the principles of Namaste Care. We just happened to have a group of men at the time who were still quite mobile. Thought a hand massage was a bit soft and a bit kind of girly. So we thought we'd just give it a try. And I think that's the way to approach it all, isn't it? With a bit of a shrug and like, let's just try something and see. And it might or it might not work. So we set up this garden group. But the idea was, I mean, if you think about Northeast and you know, pigeons and, you know, all of that stuff, but it was the idea of they were coming to the allotment, they brought a packed lunch and a flask, they sat and did a little bit of very simple gardening, but we would have, you know, old music playing, that one man in the group liked Bob Dylan, so we'd have Bob Dylan playing. We just created this space that was just lovely, but it still had the elements of Namaste Care that were important. So rather than having a hand massage, they would rub cream into their hands because they'd been gardening and they needed some, you know, keep their hands soft. So you kind of just adapt and think ways around things. And that was so successful. It was an absolute joy. And we really genuinely didn't know if it would work or not. So I think it's just about daring to try these things.
Yeah.
Just giving stuff a go. Which staff members are your ideas people who can kind of have that little spark of kind of creativity, and what gives everybody joy? What is it that's going to bring everybody the joy? You know, by the end of each session, the staff will feel better. Involving family members is brilliant, isn't it? If you can do that. Involving animals, if you've got kind of animals that'll come, you know, anything like that just kind of brings it all alive.
The other thing that I love about you know, your little men's club is that, you know, we talk about in Namaste Care International, you know, Namaste in Singapore is going to look different to Namaste in Greece, and, you know, how we adapt to the culture. And, you know, the things that I really like with your ideas is they're very British in their identity, which again is so important, because it's about not just relating to the individual, but relating to the culture and relating, you know, to things that people would have done before and enjoy doing. And I love that. I think that's another really strong element about identifying with them, you know, Britain as well.
Yeah, I think you can really reflect all of that. There is a sort of strong male culture in the northeast of England that it's kind of, if we're going to honour that, you know, how do we adapt Namaste Care to one of that? So it's thinking
And
about
then it's regions as well, isn't it? Like you say, northern men and southern men, and you know, the way that people think about things are so different. So in each of the homes, you know, across the country, Care UK are going to adapt that approach to suit the people that they're supporting. And that's another really exciting thing, because from home to home, Namaste is going to look different, you know, as well.
absolutely, yeah.
So that's really exciting. And so Nicola, just, you know, in terms of getting hold of your books and sort of you know, telling us a little bit more about that, just could you just touch on that briefly as well?
Yeah. So the first book, which looks like that, can't see it very well. There we go.
Lovely.
That came out, I think it was 2019. So it's available on like Amazon and all the usual bookstores. And the first time, it was actually one of the wives of somebody who came to our garden group said, "I read your book and it really helped." I thought that's the job done then, isn't it? So, but I think that the first book was more kind of like about the project, how you could set up a project, how the types of things that you need to think about to support implementing Namaste Care. The second book came about because I went to do a review of somebody who was living at home, and they had a volunteer going in to visit. And they said, "Oh, you know, everything's going okay, everything's fine, apart from the volunteer seems a little bit unsure of some things, some activities to do." And actually, the family were a very creative family, so this kind of was very obvious to them. I think other families might not have identified it in the same way. But I came away and I thought, actually, that's partly an issue I need to reflect on about, you know, have I covered everything well enough in training when they've had their training? But also, not everybody's creative. Not everybody comes up with those creative ideas. So the seed of an idea started with when I worked in mental health, one of the things that kind of was a bit of a hobby was writing therapeutic stories.
Okay.
So I looked into, is there an approach that can be used for people with dementia? And there are some approaches that use very, very simple sensory stories to kind of speak to people, and it's about creating a mood. So I thought, actually, you could use that as a way to create a theme or a mood for a Namaste session. So that's where the second book came from. That was published, I think that was 2021. And actually, of the two, I think more people find that accessible and very easy to dip into, because there's lots of sensory stories in there, and each sensory story has a list of activities and resource ideas of what would match that sensory story. The really moving part, there's a section in there about stories that you can read to people who are dying. So at end of life, because, you know, it's like Joyce always says, quality exists, you know, right up until quality of life is important right up until people's last breath. We can still be making a difference and doing something and spending quality time with people right up until the end of their life and beyond. So there are 3 stories in there that people can read to their dying loved one. And I think the feedback I've had from that, usually people are very moved by that. But actually that sense that actually we want to be able to do something and we don't know what to do. You know, we've kind of lost as a society that comfort around dying. What do, you know, all the death rituals, what do we do? You know, in the northeast, I don't know whether it's true across the whole country, but there was always someone in the village who came to lie out the body. You know, there was always that sort of death midwife almost. And we've lost all of those rituals and that's kind of old knowledge. So it's about that. It's about how do you spend time with people at the end, in a meaningful way. And if some people might not need to read them something, but if they do, if that's a way to connect, then that's a tool to use as well. So yeah, that book's being really well received. So I'm pleased I did that. Pleased.
Min and I were talking about how readable and fantastic they are. I know that my activities team, lots of my care staff as well, You know, they regularly dip into your books. I think there's some lovely ideas in there. It's very readable and very accessible. So, you know, I really recommend everyone to run out and have a read. So, Nick, we talked about this a little bit before our call, and we were talking about momentum and keeping the flame alive. And I just want to, I think that's such a relevant and important topic, especially as KUK are embarking on their journey and getting further down their Namaste road. I just wanted to speak to that a little bit and talk on that.
Yeah, I think it is a common theme, and I think maybe something that might help is to have a kind of almost kind of some imagery to hang that on. So I've got something that I could share with you that I actually wrote for the book launch for my second book, and it kind of captures that. So it's what I do. I write about these things. I find it easier to express that way than put things into words verbally. So I'm quite happy to share what I wrote then, because it's equally as relevant now to speak directly to all of the people who are listening to this, who are implementing Namaste care, who may be struggling with Namaste care or keeping it going, and just to kind of speak to everybody directly from the heart, really, because it does take heart to do this. It takes big hearts, and each one needs to have a kind of little congratulation that they're continuing this beautiful intervention, really. So yeah, I want to speak to all of those people now and read this out. Once upon a time, in a small nursing home in Bennington, Vermont, an inspirational social worker named Joyce Simard ignited a very beautiful flame. The flame was pink and sparkly. It burned bright and strong. It was the actual colour of love, because love does have a colour, you know. That flame radiated the hope that as dementia progresses, not everything is lost. Like-minded souls saw the flame and recognized it for what it was. And so, lanterns began to be lit from this first flame, and that light began to be carried and shared like little beacons of hope being lit around the world. Magic moments shared and smiles recaptured. Every care home worker, volunteer, family member, referrer, funder, researcher, trainer, writer, we all contribute to spreading the simple magic and love that is Namaste care. I'd like to celebrate with you the compassionate, loving time you spend with people, each of you now carrying your Namaste lantern. But please remember to nurture and feed that flame, because while you shine that light for others, you also share in that light yourselves.
Wow.
Thank you.
Nick, that's lovely. That's so beautiful. And inspirational. And yeah, that's what we need. That's what we need. And I think as society, we don't ever give enough importance to people that care and support others. And you know, you and me and lots of the people in the room know that actually, you know, our carers need to be up there in consideration with all things. We always hear about you know, the plight of the NHS and the challenges that they face. But you know, under the same adversities, with even greater challenges, less resources, we're here on the front line, and I think you're right. It needs to be celebrated, and Namaste it encapsulates so much of the good things that we're doing, doesn't it? It's like you were saying about the cross section of your background and how you've brought all of those things together, but a common thread has been, you know, how to look at someone and really see that person as who they are, and care for them in that way as well. So Nick, as always, it's absolutely delightful to talk to you. I love spending time with you. Thank you so much. I hope everyone's enjoyed our little chat here today.
So yes.
And we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, keep up the good work, everybody.